We'll shift our focus now to thinking about global patterns of intergroup relations. Several concepts are key here, listed on the slide. We'll discuss each of these concepts in the next couple of slides. This slide helps us think about these different concepts on a continuum of humanity and acceptance. Clearly, genocide is the least human and most intolerant of the practices, exhibiting complete rejection of the group. On the other hand, pluralism and multiculturalism are the most humane and the most accepting of different types of practices and cultures. Genocide refers to the annihilation of a group of people due to their race, their perceived race, or their ethnicity. Part of the justification is that the group is inferior and poses some kind of threat to the dominant group, such as the competition for resources, or, as in the case of Germany, a threat to the racial purity of the Aryan race. Population transfer sometimes occurs when there are large shifts of one race or ethnicity from an area. Sometimes this is direct and sometimes this is indirect. Indirect transfer happens when the living conditions are made so harsh that the population decides to leave on their own. In Nazi Germany, some Jews left before the war because the political climate became so hostile that those that had the means to leave and saw that the climate was worsening were able to find a way to immigrate to a new country. Direct transfer is when a dominant group expels a minority forcefully, placing the German Jews in concentration camps or the Japanese Americans into internment camps during World War II, and forcing the Native Americans to go to reservations are all examples of population transfers. We'll turn our focus now to some of the global patterns of intergroup relations and start this discussion talking about some of the basic concepts. We talked earlier this semester about colonialism and how that allowed the most industrialized nations to exploit the least industrialized nations. Internal colonialism refers to how a country's dominant group exploits minority groups for its advantage. The dominant group manipulates the social institutions to diminish the minority group's access to society's benefits. Two examples of this are America's policy in allowing slavery in the 1800s and South Africa's system of apartheid. Segregation refers to the policy of keeping racial and ethnic groups apart from each other, and internal colonialism is often accompanied by policies that enforce segregation. Assimilation is the process of how people are absorbed into the mainstream culture. In forced assimilation, the dominant group refuses to allow the minority group to practice its religion, to speak its language, or to follow its customs. Permissible assimilation allows the minority group to assimilate at its own speed. Multiculturalism is sometimes also referred to as pluralism. This kind of policy encourages ethnic differences. Switzerland is a highly multicultural society where groups of French, Italians, Germans, and Romanish have all kept their own languages and lived together peacefully. In the U.S., we have 5 racial ethnic groups that comprise the vast majority of the population: European Americans, the Latino or Hispanic group, African Americans, Asian Americans, and Native Americans. This chart helps us see the percentage of the general population for each of these 5 groups. We can think a little differently about the white European group that is the numerical majority in this country. If we were to think in terms of how this group is represented along the lines of European descent, we might think a little less differently about this group. So if we were to single out the different groups according to their European origins, we would find that no one group is a simple political majority. The largest group is only 14.2%, which is those that come from Germany. This map helps us understand where many of the dominant and minority groups are located. Notice that in Texas, that 56.5% are minority group members, i.e., minorities are the numerical majority in that state. The history of Texas and its annexation to the U.S. in the 1800s is the reason for this. Hawaii has the highest minority group, 77%. Maine, Vermont, and West Virginia have the lowest minority rates. So let's ask, why do you think that these population demographics and patterns exist? The term WASP refers to white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Anglo-Saxon is a term that refers to the peoples of Great Britain, the indigenous peoples, as well as the Germans that immigrated to England in the 5th century. While we think of England as a separate nationality, their ethnic roots and heritage go back to the period of time from the 5th century through the Norman conquest at the turn of the 1st century. The adoption of Christianity was also a large part of the development of the Anglo-Saxon culture. So the term WASP tends to refer to groups of people that are wealthy and well-connected, who are predominantly of British ancestry, and many trace their roots back to the American colonial period. White ethnics refer to people that are white, but whose ethnicity and cultural background does not match the WASP culture. To think a little deeper about this, we could look at the chart provided earlier and think about what groups might be WASP and what might be considered ethnic whites. One aspect of being white is what's known as white privilege. Peggy McIntosh developed this idea that whites have privilege because they are never questioned like minorities might be. When she goes to the store, the security people don't follow Peggy McIntosh around. When she's a leader for a cause, people don't say it's because of her race. Or when she watches TV, people like her are portrayed positively. Her list goes on at length to explain her privilege, which is often unexamined unless one takes a course or a class that points it out to that person.